those of you who are regulars know what we're covering when you hear this sound drop.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Those poor astronauts are still up there, and it's only getting worse. NASA official acknowledges internal disagreement on safety of Starliner return. Boeing wants to take the ship back because you can really trust the people who, after the first MAX crash, said, "Oh, no, don't worry, we got it." The chief of human spaceflight operations for NASA, former astronaut Ken Bowersox, said no final decisions have been made on how Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams return to Earth. He said there were reasonable disagreements among engineers at NASA, which is the customer for the spaceflight, and Boeing, which developed and operates Starliner, about the viability of the 28 reaction control system thrusters that are used for delicate maneuvering and pointing of the vehicle. Quote, I think it's been very healthy, our Sox said of these internal discussions during a call with reporters on Wednesday. I have to admit that sometimes when we get disagreement, it's not fun. It can be painful having those discussions, but it's what makes us a good organization. Okay, if you're such a good organization, why can't you get these fucking astronauts home? To continue, NASA has been studying various contingencies, but officials appear to have settled on two different options for bringing the two astronauts back to Earth. They could still fly back on Starliner if NASA engineers become more comfortable with the uncertainty about the thruster performance. And if so, they would do so during the second half of this month or the first part of September. Alternatively, NASA could launch the Crew 9 mission with a complement of 2 rather than 4 astronauts, and Wilmore and Williams would join that increment on the space station and fly back to Earth in February 2025. You know, I hear
February?
Yes, they will wind up having been in space for 8 months at that point, because what they're talking about is SpaceX was already scheduled to go up. They would send it up with 2 astronauts so that they can bring them back. But once they've gone through the expense and the effort and the logistics of sending a capsule up there, they wanted to do the mission originally planned, which is a 6-month mission. So they'll just do the mission and they'll catch a ride home with them when they go back as scheduled.
They probably have Steve Bannon up there. They want to keep him up there till after the election, so he can't advise Trump.
So he can't advise Trump.
Yeah, because he would be in charge of the more delicate maneuvering and pointing of the vehicle.
Yeah.
Well, this gets into this. Another part of the problem is they're afraid that the Starliner is so fucked that it might brick one of the few ports they have for docking shuttles there. They're not sure if they could get it off the station safely, but we'll get to that. Asked if he thought one of the two scenarios was more likely than the other, Bowersox said he could not say. However, a final decision will be made fairly soon. Bowersox said NASA needs to choose the astronauts' return path by mid-August. NASA's concern about Starliner's thrusters boils down to the failure of 5 of them during the vehicle's ascent to the space station. Starliner's flight computer shut off 5 thrusters provided by Aerojet Rocketdyne in flight. 4 of the 5 thrusters were recovered after overheating. Since then, Boeing and NASA have conducted ground and space-based tests of the small thrusters to try to replicate the failure and better understand fundamentally what is occurring. By getting to the root cause, the engineers will feel confident in their ability to address the problem for Starliner's flight back to Earth. And just understand from other articles I've read, there's just no way to really simulate the actual conditions of space on the ground. They can only roughly approximate with these tests. In the ground tests, the engineers were able to demonstrate similar failures. Subsequent inspections showed bulging in a Teflon seal in an oxidizer valve known as a poppet, which could restrict the flow of nitrogen tetroxide propellant. The thrusters consume the nitrogen tetroxide and mix it with hydrogen fuel for combustion. Despite the tests, however, engineers still don't understand precisely why the bulging is occurring and whether it will manifest on Starliner's flight back to Earth. They say you can bet on anything in Vegas. I would really like to know what the odds are on them getting back on the Starliner versus hitching a ride with Elon, because that looks like easy money to me.
Yes.
Quote, people really want to understand the physics of what's going on relative to the physics of the Teflon, what's causing it to heat up and what's causing it to contract, said Steve Stitch, who manages the commercial crew program for NASA. It's like all these people have names that were rejected for superheroes by Marvel. That's really what the team is off trying to understand. I think the NASA community in general would like to understand a little bit more of the root cause. I love the euphemistic language they use. God damn it,
Yes.
we have 2 astronauts stranded in space. We're afraid this thing is going to blow up the whole space station. Boeing engineers are advocating for flying Starliner as is. Oh, are they? Are they?
Of course they are.
That enough is known about the problem that failures will not occur during the vehicle's return to Earth. However,
we tested all the seals with dish soap. What's up? Send them back. Come on.
we had a guy jump on the joints to make sure they would all fit together. What could go wrong? However, during meetings of key engineers at NASA, known as the Program Control Board this week, there was no agreement that the so-called flight rationale was enough to fly crew on the vehicle. To briefly explain this, flight rationale is because the logic is space flight is never safe to the standard you would want, say, a plane to be. So the standard is not safe. It's flight rationale. In other words, are they more likely to not die than die? Then you've got good flight rationale.
Right.
Quote, we heard from a lot of folks that had concerns, Bowersock said. We heard enough voices that the decision was not clear at the Program Control Board. I'll bet. Because Boeing is sitting there saying, this is going to cost us billions if we can't get this thing back. And as Boeing has demonstrated, most notably with the MAX, they don't give a fuck if they kill people. They don't care if they kill people. They're going to advocate for what's best for their business and their stock price. Well, not what's best for their business, because losing their reputation, which was once gold star, and becoming this company that people actually use special search engines to avoid flying on, has certainly not been good for their long-term business prospects.
And if those 2 astronauts come back on the Starliner and that blows up in space,
oh my God,
then the whistleblower that comes forward from Boeing, they're gonna get a little bit unalived, So
I saw somebody did a really funny video about if your boyfriend cheats on you, declare that they're a Boeing whistleblower to get rid of them.
Just immediately.
Given that NASA will soon decide whether to fly crew on Starliner, the Boeing team has about a week to convince the NASA team of Starliner safety before a potential switch to Crew Dragon. Stitch also explained why it would take a few weeks to reconfigure the software package on board Starliner to allow for a safe undocking of the spacecraft without crew. This is one reason the Crew 9 mission launch was pushed from August 18th to late September. Okay, so this is where they get into, and this is really good. They changed the software package so that it can't be flown without a crew now for no apparent reason. Although the capability to undock without a crew exists within the flight software on Starliner, it is currently configured for crew operations. That is, during the process of undocking and moving away from the space station, the flight software takes certain actions and the crew takes certain actions. This configuration change toward integrated operations between software and crew was made after the previous autonomous flight of Starliner in 2022 that flew to the space station and back. Quote, Essentially, what we're asking the team is to go back 2 years in time and resurrect the software parameters that are required to give automatic responses to breakouts near the ISS should we have a problem in close to ISS, which the software now allows them to do manually, Stitch said. The team is always updating these mission data loads as different things change. Before we go execute that, it's just smart and responsible to take the software and mission data loads in this configuration, go into the integrated test facility where all the flight software resides, and go run it through some test cases just to make sure we haven't missed anything. That's really what would take the time if we were to pivot to an uncrewed undock. All right, so this doesn't completely get into it, so let me translate this for you. It's going to take them 4 weeks to update the software. Nobody can explain why Boeing, in its wisdom, decided when they already had a craft that could be operated remotely, why they changed the software so that now it can't. So now it would take 4 weeks to send a software update to this shuttle. That's why they delayed the Space Nine, because they don't know how they're going to dock it. They need to free up this port and get it off the space station. They are literally afraid it might blow up the space station because they don't know what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen. You're talking about an untested software configuration where the thing could run into the space station. Like, they don't know what it will do. But if they can't get it off, they've lost a very important docking port on the station forever. So that is what's going on there. It's just kind of unbelievable. I feel like the three of us could have designed something better for NASA.
Well, certainly Jake could have. I don't know about the three of us, but the three of us.
Yeah, I don't know about
Certainly
us.
Jake could have. Certainly Jake could have. Stanford
Certainly
boy.
Jake could have.
Yeah, Stanford boy,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, have you seen that little Patreon scroll and the Rumble thing?
Yeah,
Jake
right.
can get that. He can get that Starliner home, man.
Get that going. So February 2025, that's 6 months from now. So what? They've been up there for about 2 months. So overall, that's about 8 months.
For 2 months. They will have been in space for 8 months at that point.
Wow.
What was supposed to be an 8-day trip.
That's twice as long as Steve Bannon's jail sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
They ended up in space. That's a lot of time to devote your life to being up in space unnecessarily.
Well, you know what's funny? Trump was actually talking to Butch Wilmore about being his campaign manager just because he liked his name.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it might be part of why they're keeping him up there.
You sound the part. Exactly. Butch Wilmore.
Please clap.